I just wanted some clarification on tithing.
Being unable to forgive somebody who causes an offense
Does
towards
it really matter whether someone is Protestant or
The
Catholic?
genealogies are different from Matthew to Luke.
I was wondering what the Bible said in terms of what I should do.
This is Pastor's Perspective. We're here every Monday through Friday providing answers on a variety of topics, including the Bible, end times, other religions, and the family. Call right now with your question at 1-888-564-6173. That's 888-564-6173. You can also post your question at facebook.com/Pastor's Perspective. And now here again is your host, Brian Perez.
From Southern California to South Carolina and all points in between and beyond. You guys like that?
You sounded like Buzz Lightyear, infinity and beyond.
I was trying to do a cross between Buzz Lightyear and Jerry Dunphy. I don't know. But welcome to the Pastor's Perspective program.
Well, South Carolina, I mean, you're not going down far enough to...
I was kind of doing like a diagonal.
Oh, yeah, kind of straight shot across.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, something. But anyway, hello. Brian Broderson and Bobby Conway here today to answer Bible questions and stuff like that. We're here for 2 hours today. Give us a call. Let's fill up those phone lines, 888-564-6173. What is new, guys?
Not much. I mean, living the COVID-19 lifestyle.
Man, oh man. It continues.
Yeah, let me think. What is new? What is today? Today's Thursday. Did I do anything that stands out today? No, I guess not. I can't really remember any. What even happened this morning? I got up and had a cup of coffee. Okay, yeah.
Now he remembers.
Now
it's all coming back.
Yeah,
to him.
and it was.
You're coming too.
There was nothing noteworthy. So.
Just another day.
Just another day
in paradise.
But I did get a text from my good friend Bobby Conway, who sent me a text about an article that he read that said, "Hey, this is just the stuff we've been talking about." Right?
Yes.
Do you remember that?
I do.
Okay.
Yes. That article that you're referring to came out in the Washington Times.
Yeah.
It was by Jeff Myers, the president of Summit Worldview Ministries. And basically, it was his contention that we've spent so much time trying to win this next election. Mm-hmm. He's speaking as a conservative, when he said in reality, he said, we've lost our future because we have to spend more time on worldview training. It's interesting. He said that studies are showing that come 2016, with the emerging generation with their propensity towards Marxism, that by 2016, the political climate will be completely to the left. And
wait. 2016 is behind us.
Oh, yeah. 2000. Was it 2024?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much for reminding me on that. By 2024, the climate will change. By 2028, it'll be a completely different world, fixed. And the danger is that so many of the youth don't have a worldview. Only 19% of professed Christians have a worldview, but 59% or something like that. What was the 59%? Wasn't it like the percentage of people who are taught a Christian worldview?
I couldn't remember.
Would be more like 59% likely to stay more conservative on their viewpoints. What'd you feel reading that article?
Yeah, I understood what he was saying, and I thought, there's a lot of truth to it. You know, the younger generations are. And I think he pointed out in there, you know, people are kind of more inclined to go with the way they feel about something versus, you know, the actual facts or the reality about it. So, you know, socialism makes you feel good right now because you think you're helping people. And I think that's the buy-in for so many younger people. They just think, well, gosh, of course we want to help people. Of course we want everything to be equal and all of that. And you know, that all sounds great, but there's another factor here that's not being brought to the surface. And it's the totalitarian element of socialism, which has proven itself to be reality over and over and over and over again. So, but more specifically, because Jeff is the director of Summit Ministries, and Summit Ministries is a ministry that really focuses on worldview and training people in worldview. And you and I have been having a conversation about that. So,
yeah, it's something that I feel really burdened by. I mean, obviously, according to the statistics, and I think what he's trying to say is that you're going to have a socialistic country that is going to be firmly rooted in place by 2028. That's just where we are. And the only thing that you can do to possibly change it. So in other words, we're spending so much time, he'd say, as conservatives trying to win this next election.
Yeah.
But by 2028, it doesn't really matter. You might win this election, but it's already gone based on statistics. So what does that mean for the church? It means we have to teach our young people how to have a biblical Christian worldview. Otherwise, you know, who knows what we're up against.
And like you said, his point was once a person is established in that worldview, they stick with it.
Yes,
throughout their adult life. Yeah, I think, I mean, you know, obviously he's passionate about this because that's what he is, who he is and what he does. And so oftentimes, you know, whatever you do, you think this is the most important thing in the world. So everybody's got to get on board with this. And it is important, but I mean, you know, whenever I read those kind of predictions or statistics and all of that, I just say, well, you know, that's possible, but let's not forget to keep God in the equation, because God can do things that, you know, we don't foresee, and he can put things in reverse. And he did that. You know, the 60s is a great case in point, because, I mean, we were just right on this trajectory in the 60s, big time. I mean, you know, all of those protests and all those things that were going on, those were all driven by Marxist ideas and so forth. And it's like God just sort of put the brakes on the whole thing and said, okay, I'm going to step in here and I'm going to intervene. And so it's almost like, you know, in 1970, God hit the pause button, and now the pause button has been released, and we just sort of picked up where we left off, you know. So, I mean, I agree that we need to train people, but I also agree that we've got to look beyond that, because, I mean, you know, how many people can you possibly train that are going to go out and make the kind of difference that he was talking about?
I mean, I think that the work that we have ahead of us is unbelievable. That's why we have to figure out how to network more as churches. We've got to figure out how to prioritize. We need a new manifesto of sorts. I mean, I think the difference that I would feel maybe is in the 70s with maybe the Jesus movement, like for sure what we need is a national revival. But the Spirit of God could show up and we can have this national revival and people could kind of fall deeply in love with Jesus. But because they've been taught a morality from the culture, they might think that Jesus approves of certain things that then influences their political opinion. Where in the 70s, the church and the culture shared a lot of the same values as it relates to things like sexuality.
Yeah,
now,
but the hippies didn't share it. I mean, the hippies were the outliers. They were the ones who were going.
Well, that's true. Free love.
I mean, you know, they were not going with the culture on sex. They were making up their own rules. That's where it all kind of started, right?
And I guess that would be the thing. So and there was a lot of hippies that were getting saved here in the 70s, right? So, and you would have probably known a lot of people or got some of these firsthand stories. They get saved, right? But they come into the church, but they begin to learn what the Bible has to say about sexuality. My fear is many churches have been so influenced now by the culture that they're teaching a wrong belief.
And one of the questions up on the board has to do with a major world Christian leader just coming out and basically saying that same-sex unions are now permissible. So
let's hear
and
it.
That was not happening in the 70s.
That you would not have heard that.
No. Very true. Yeah, we did talk about that yesterday when the news broke about the Pope making that announcement. Andrew in Westminster, maybe you weren't listening to yesterday's program, but you just want to know what our take is on his announcement?
Well, yeah. Well, I've got a let me elaborate a little bit on the Pope. I used to be a Catholic, and I read John 3:3 and became a born-again Christian, and, of course, the whole Bible. And the thing is with the Pope is people listen to him, even if they're not Catholic. But most Catholics, 90% of them, will listen to him and think he is the Word of God. That's what Catholics do. They don't, we didn't pray, we confessed to a priest. We didn't confess to God a lot of time. Mm-hmm. And so they're very driven by this Pope. And it scares me when I hear him say things like that, mm-hmm. because I think he is demonized, because it's, in Ephesians in 5:11 it says, and have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them.
Okay.
So he needs to be exposed as a sinner. If he's for the sinner, he is as the sinner, as I believe someone said yesterday in Romans 1:32. So what's your take on that? I mean, we need to expose this. He's been exposed before by you guys, not maybe you particularly, but by Christians, pastors, Vernon McGee, pastors.
Now, what's your definition of exposing him, though? I mean,
that he
no
is a sinner.
Right, but Pastor Brian, what would you add?
Well, I would say one thing just to kind of balance it out. There are plenty of Catholics that are not listening to this Pope, mm-hmm. and plenty of Catholics that are very, very concerned. I mean, there's a substantial movement within the Catholic Church of leaders even who believe that this Pope is taking the Church in the absolute wrong direction. Yeah. And I think this was probably like the straw that broke the camel's back, because it's so blatant. It's so mm-hmm. obviously something that Scripture is not going to support. So, so I just think that we need to recognize that there are plenty of Catholics that are very disturbed by this and, disillusioned, and, leaders within the Catholic Church that are pushing back against and fighting against it. And, of course, exposing it, I mean, it's just simply to say that, he's kind of exposed himself by coming out and saying what he said, and now we just simply line the Scripture up alongside of what he's saying, and it's pretty darn clear that he's saying something that the Bible is saying the opposite thing about. So,
now, did you understand him to say that the Bible teaches that same-sex relationships okay, or that people in culture should have civil union?
I don't think he's saying the Bible teaches that.
Yeah.
I think what he's saying, I think he's making an allowance for it in culture, Mm-hmm. I mean, so here in the U.S. we have legalized same-sex marriage.
Right.
Before same-sex marriage was on the table, there was the idea of a union, which was not going to be qualified as mm-hmm. a marriage, but it was the person was going to have the same sort of benefits and all of that that goes along with marriage. And so he's supporting that kind of an idea right there. Now, to me, it's a little bit strange because same-sex marriage has pretty much already been embraced almost universally in the West. So I don't quite understand why now he's coming out and saying this. Mm-hmm. That's a little bit perplexing to me. I don't know. I haven't read enough of what he said to know why he's saying that.
One of the thoughts that I've considered myself is, okay, so we know what the Bible teaches mm-hmm. on homosexuality, right? We believe that sex has a context between a man and a woman in marriage. That said, there, as it relates to, the church, you have this position. Because we're being met with so much cultural change mm-hmm. as we go along, you'll get some people in the church, they'll just kind of like, hey, this is what the Bible, they'll redefine the Bible to make it more palatable for culture.
Yeah.
At the same token, Jesus never left the culture here and told the culture, you're the salt of the earth and you're the light of the world as a culture. Rather, mm-hmm. we're to do that as a church. Is there a way, and I'm not convinced of this, I'm truly just dialoguing out mm-hmm. loud. Is there a way that you could hold fast your position as a Christian and hold fast for that in a church, but then recognize you're not holding a culture to the same standard that you would in the church. Therefore, you could see how the Pope could arrive at a statement like that while potentially holding to what the Bible says. Or does that get dangerous? And I could see a slippery slope there, because it's like, okay, now we say that's okay there, when reality, we're going to vote our values, right?
Yeah.
So we got to be consistent. But I just wonder how it is that we're going to reach people, yet then also say, if you come into the culture, into the church, this is our values here.
Yeah.
And I don't know that you can change it or not, but there is a sense of holding people in the culture to our church standard when they might not come, that I think about.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think about it too. And I think that though the church, the church is, like you said, the church is salt and light in the world. So salt is, the meaning of that is varied, but one of the meanings of it is undoubtedly a preservant. So the church is to preserve the culture, the world around it from rotting. And the church is prophetic. The voice of the church is to be a prophetic voice. So I don't think the church could come out in a supportive and say, oh yes, we agree on a moral basis that this is fine. Just don't call it marriage. A union is fine. But I also think that in a free society that's not a Christian society, and that people do have rights, and so that does somehow have to be addressed. So I think that somehow, the church has to, on the one hand, make send the clear message that this is not God's plan or will for people's lives. Yeah. But the state's going to do something, and they're not necessarily going to check with us to see if we think they ought to. So then I think if that's, I think most evangelical Christians would now, looking back, say, man, it would have been way better to have same-sex unions than Obergefell and same-sex marriage. Right? I think a lot of Christians would say that because the problem is the marriage thing, because that's where it gets, that's where you cross over into a boundary that is very much biblical, because marriage originates from the Bible, contrary to popular opinion. That is actually where it originates. Yeah. So on that level, I get that. I understand that. I'm not quite sure what the Pope is saying on it. That's why I wish I knew a little bit more about,
or what he believes deep down.
Yeah, what's going on in his head.
Yeah, because we're both fundamentally saying, hey, this is what the Bible says. Yeah. This is the way we understand it. But there is that element, like where, like for example, you're going to have Muslims in our culture, and you're going to have Mormons in our culture, and Christians are in our culture. And that's part of what it means to be an American. We have a diversity of opinion. We have atheists. And I'm not saying as a Christian that all of my Bible values need to win at the end of the day on a cultural level. I'm just saying that as it relates to being in a church and as a pastor, let's say you want the right to be able to lead your flock according to what the Bible says. But then when you do live in the culture, you want to be that salt, you want to be that preservative. Yeah. But at the same token, we have to not fall apart if the culture doesn't adopt all of our values.
Yeah, and again, going back to the Pope, I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think the Pope is now saying that same-sex relationships are okay. I don't think he's saying that the church ought to recognize that this is okay. I don't think he's saying that. Yeah. He might be, but I don't think he's saying that.
I didn't get that from what I read either.
Okay, so if he's addressing it from more of a cultural standpoint, it's still, I think, it's not wise, because I think he's, as a recognized Christian leader, he's sending a pretty confusing message to everybody. And of course, lots of people are going to jump on it and say, see, the Pope even says that same-sex relationships are fine. So that's the problem.
So what do you say to our listeners who are maybe they attend a Roman Catholic church, and now, like you said, a lot of Catholics probably don't agree with this pope.
Yeah.
But now they're conflicted. They're like, should we stay in the Catholic Church? Should we leave?
Yeah. Well, I think you have to kind of look at your own individual parish and your own priest and see where they line up, you know. Because, again, I know of Catholic priests who are very much opposing a lot of, this is just another thing in another link in the chain of some of the strange things that Pope Francis has done over the past, you know, however many years he's been the Pope. And I've listened to, you know, Catholic bishops, you know, come out and basically just preach the Bible and contradict the Pope and challenge the Pope. So,
but doesn't that even seem like a little bit ironic? Because, you know, if it seems like you're kind of questioning your own Catholicism, because your belief in Catholicism is going to be this authority that the Pope carries. And when the Pope speaks, yet you can speak out against it.
But here's an interesting thing, because, you know, what I see it doing is it's breaking down that idea that the Pope speaks ex cathedra, that whatever the Pope says, because now a lot of Catholics are saying, I don't know about that anymore. You know, they used to say, like, absolutely that's the case. Now they're like, maybe not. Which I think is actually kind of a good thing, because it's a good thing, because it'll push them more toward the Scriptures.
Right.
Let's see what the Scriptures say, because that's really the big question, right?
Yep. Similar question here from Kathy and Paul. Can we be pro-life and believe that abortion is wrong, but still believe in the importance that because we live in a free society, everyone still has the option to choose? Bobby?
I mean, we want to be as consistent as we possibly can be in our thinking. And so, yes, there are people that are non-Christians that are going to have the right to choose, and we can't coerce our pro-life opinions on them. If somebody's a professed Christian and they're going to be pro-choice, that is really problematic. I wouldn't say you're not a Christian for that. I'd say you're very inconsistent as a Christian. You haven't thought through biblically this issue very well. There's some real shortfalls that are in place. And so, of course, we live in a culture with people with pro-choice, and we're pro-life, and we need to figure out how to get along and love each other and care for each other. I do think in the church it's very problematic, though, when you've got Christians that are going to be pro-choice. Now, what you have is a lot of people who, in the past, their main voting thing would be whether someone's pro-life or not. Now there's even a swing away that you're seeing of, hey, abortion's just not the biggest issue, so I'm still not going to really worry about that. So I can be okay voting for somebody who is pro-choice.
Yeah.
You know, and so it is interesting how murky we are. I mean, Billy Graham's granddaughter came out and basically saying, hey, I'm going to, vote for Biden because I think that, Trump is, creating all these issues.
And Billy Graham's other granddaughter came out and said, I'm voting for Trump.
Okay, so we got some family division going on.
Thanksgiving at the Graham.
I did not know that.
Graham house.
Yeah. So we've got some, but I do think that, I don't have a problem saying, I'm an independent, and I just want to know who's going to most closely align with the Bible. But when you look at the Scriptures, man, you've got some interesting things coming on right now.
Yeah. But going back to the pro-life, pro-choice thing, I mean, and so much of this is it's a battle over words, right? It's like, just the thing of choice. It's like, well, of course, that's a right, that you choose what you're going to do with your body, and a woman, has that right and stuff.
Yeah.
But there's a person involved in this conversation that is never consulted, and that is the one that's going to die.
That's right.
That's the one that gets no choice.
Yep.
So, we got to worry about choice. But, well, what about this? What about the person that's actually at stake here?
Yeah.
But it's been so blurred through just language, using these different terms to lessen the severity of what's really going on is obviously the case. So, it's just a bundle of confusion and deception. And
I love what Mark Middleberg had to say as it relates to giving the benefit of the doubt. When it comes to a child being in the womb, whether or not it is a child, he shares a story. If I remember correctly, it's about his wife riding in a car with her grandpa when she was younger. And as they were going down the road, her grandpa slowed down because there was a box in the middle of the road. And when he slowed down, up out of the cardboard box came a toddler that was playing hide and go seek. And Mark Mittelberg talked about, what if her grandpa just ran the box over, and thought to himself, it's just a cardboard box. Mm-hmm. What he did is he slowed down, because you never know, and he gave the benefit of the doubt. Well, are we that sure that it's not a child? Those of you out there that are pro-choice? Because what if it really is that there is a child in the cardboard box, namely the womb? Mm-hmm. I think we owe it the benefit of the doubt.
Man, that story makes my, I don't like that story. I want to make sure I never run over a box.
Yeah. Right? But isn't that a good example of we really are making that assumption? So I go, even in the smallest chance that it is life, and we think that ultrasound technology, the Bible, it all just goes to show that it is. But let's say it wasn't that strong. Shouldn't we still give the benefit of the doubt?
And here's a couple of things too, because I read this article the other day about this guy who, tells the story of, how his wife, it was a life and death situation, with the wife and the baby, and an abortion was necessary, but they lived in a state where abortion was illegal. So they basically couldn't, the hospital would not perform an abortion, and, she almost died. And so then this guy came out to say why he was, pro-choice and so forth because of that. And I thought, well, that's a moving story, and I'm sure it's true, and I'm sure that was all very dangerous and unfortunate. But that is not even 1% of the cases when it comes to abortion. It's rarely that. Mm-hmm. It's mostly a convenience matter. Mm-hmm. Mostly it's a form of birth control, right?
Yeah.
And I think that, so we have to, because everything just gets super emotional, right? And then you get into the emotion about, the women, and I've heard this lately, and I think it's something to think about, that most women, especially in poorer communities that get abortions, they're not like, hey, cool, I'm going to go get an abortion today. I mean, this is something that's heavy for them. This is something that weighs on them. It's not anything that they are proud of or that they want to do. They're, in a sense, their circumstances have just sort of forced them into it, right. And they don't see that there's any other options. And all of that to say, I think that, the voices that are pushing for abortion are usually, it's not the poor ladies in the ghetto that are getting the abortions that are out there saying, I got to have the abortion. Mm-hmm. It's people with an agenda, mm-hmm. A different agenda. That's part of their bigger agenda, and it's an agenda to just be completely free to do whatever we want. We don't want any restraints, and we don't want any God talk or anybody telling us what we can do. That's the super, I think, driving force behind the issue. And then you bring in all the emotional stuff to use that as ammunition to get people sympathetic to your cause.
Mm. Yep. I remember a few months ago during this whole COVID thing that I saw a meme or something. They said, this party that is so pro-choice are the ones that don't want to give us a choice when it comes to, going to church and all this other stuff. So it's not about a choice in that regard.
I was at a pro-life kind of a prayer walk one time, and the pro-choice people that were out there, this was in Charlotte, broke my heart. There was a girl holding a sign, and it just said, girls just want to have fun.
Yeah.
Outside the abortion mm-hmm. clinic.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I thought, wow, what a message.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's it. That is the message.
Yeah.
That is sad. That is really sad. All right, just about up to our break here, so we'll take some more calls when we come back. 888-564-6173. Good conversation about the Pope and abortion and a lot of other things in the first half hour here, and we'll talk more. In fact, we're here for 2 hours today. We'd love to hear from you between 3 and 5 p.m. Pacific time today. 888-564-6173 is the number. 888-564-6173. Pastor Brian Broderson of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa in Southern California, and author and apologist Dr. Bobby Conway from the 1 Minute Apologist channel on YouTube. We'll be right back. 888-564-6173.
Pastor's Perspective continues in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. Pastor's Perspective continues with your question to 1-888-564-6173. And now here again is your host, Brian Perez.
Hello there. Yes, we are back. And what we do here daily, Monday through Friday, 3 to 4 p.m. Pacific time, is answer the questions that you guys have about whatever. 888-564-6173 is the number to call. 888-564-6173. In the studio today, Pastor Brian Broderson of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa in Southern California. And this Sunday at Calvary Costa Mesa, Pastor Brian doing two messages out on the field, church on the field at 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Pacific time. So be there. It's Communion Sunday this week, right?
Yes, it is. It's Communion Sunday, and this is our last evening service, 5 o'clock.
Yeah, because it's getting dark
out there. Of course, the time is going to change, and we will be in the dark. So we're going to go back to, on November 1st, we're going to go back to 8:30 and 11 on the field, which is also the same times that our online church airs. Yeah, and on the 1st, we're going to do something just a little bit different for that one day. The 8:30 service is going to be just our normal service, and then the 11 o'clock service is going to be a Spanish service. So our Spanish ministry is going to be taking the 11 o'clock on the 1st of November. So on the field, it's going to be great. We're actually, the space that they normally meet in on Sundays is going to be a voting station. And so we've given up that space for voters for that day, but that'll bring the Spanish ministry out there. So a great opportunity to come out if you have Spanish-speaking family, friends, whatever the case, you've been wanting them to come to church. Maybe they're apprehensive about coming. We got this wonderful, warm atmosphere out on the field, and they can come and be completely safe and
Awesome.
Have a good time.
So that'll be Sergio teaching. It won't be
Sergio.
you and Sergio. I
No,
thought it was going to be like one of those translator things where you're going to say it in English, he's going to say it in Spanish.
I've done that plenty of times, and I don't mind doing that. But no, it's going to be Sergio, yeah. So actually, I'm going to be out of town. So my son's going to do the first service at 8:30, and then Sergio's going to do the 11 that day.
Very cool. Find out more at cccm.com. Also here, author and apologist Dr. Bobby Conway from the 1 Minute Apologist channel on YouTube. How did your conversation on Molinism go yesterday? And what is Molinism again, for people wondering? Why should I watch this?
Yeah, well, I mean, for the last 500 years, there's been, a discussion between the Calvinists and the Arminian camp. But there was another reformer named Luis Molina who lived in Spain. And,
Speaking of Spanish services.
Yes, exactly. But it is believed that if Molina and Calvin had the opportunity to sit down together, that Calvin would have been a Molinist. And Molinism is named after Molina, and it's kind of a middle option for those that struggle with some of the questions presented to them under Calvinism and some of the questions presented to the Arminian. And so it refers to God's middle knowledge, and it's a really phenomenal knowledge that God does have. It's not only that he knows what you could do, but he also knows what you will do. But he knows what you would do if he was to create a potential world, another world. God knows what you would do before he even creates the world. So therefore, that shows God's sovereignty and that he knows what you would do. But then, given that it's you that would do it, there's human freedom and there's liberty. So that when God does create, he created this world that we live in knowing what we would do. And so he's sovereign over it, and we're free. And that's a really powerful, masterful view of knowledge. And so how did it go? Well, it went terrible for the first 15 minutes because we had internet issues. And then we picked it up finally, and it went fantastic. But Tim Stratton's a great scholar. William Lane Craig said of him, he's an emerging scholar. He just finished his PhD. But William Lane Craig said, I'm so thankful that somebody has taken my work on Molinism and has written a piece that has popularized it. And so Tim Stratton's who I interviewed.
I wish you would have been over this morning for coffee, because this is the conversation that Cheryl and I were having, because she's studying open theism.
Yeah.
And Molinism came up, so she was asking me about it, and we were discussing it. She's reading Greg Boyd. And,
okay. Yeah, open theist.
Open theist, yeah. So is there anything more to Molinism than, is that kind of the main thing, that middle knowledge? Is that sort of like the gist of it? Because Calvinism obviously has 5 points, and that was a response to Arminius's views. So does it just address that one thing?
I mean, that is the main issue that's being talked about, is God's middle knowledge. So it is talking about, that God knows what we would do given any of these possible situations, and it really frees you up, because on the Arminian side, maybe the Calvinist is worried that there's not enough of an emphasis on the sovereignty of God, but then on the Reformed side, the Arminian's worried that the Calvinist is not respecting libertarian freedom, and Molinism comes in because of God's knowledge of everything. It helps us to see kind of this missing piece that put things together, and I think that it takes some time to, get our hands around what's happening with it, but I think that it's helpful. Now, you take open theism, like I used to be a 5-point Calvinist, and you take open theism, while they might limit God's knowledge. Like an open theist, for those who are listening, is like God's kind of learning. He doesn't have a radical view of knowledge like the Molinist would believe, or even just the Arminian or the Calvinist. Rather, God learns day by day as things go on. And yet, you still preserve God's character and love, though. On the Reform side, it seems like it could look to some people as if God's not all that love. He's powerful, so it's kind of like God's skill set is one of power, but then God's character is one of love. And so some would even make the argument, go, well, if you had to choose, what would you be more impressed by? So then some go, Well, man, I'd take an open theist where God's characters love versus one that appears this way. Now, this is some of the conversations that happens. I can avoid both of those by taking a Molinist position. But I did feel like the danger of the Calvinist position is we overdefine sovereignty to mean something like fatalism. And I think that's problematic.
I think that's it. It gets going in that direction pretty quick, especially with some Calvinists. But the other extreme is equally problematic, where God ends up appears to be more loving because there's just a bunch of bad stuff that happened that he really didn't have any control over and didn't really even know was going to happen. So it's like,
and you're like Rabbi Kushner, right?
Right. Exactly. So
who comes up with his theory?
So good. Yeah, that's. Yeah, so did Tim write a book on it?
Yes, he did. Mere Molinism.
Molinism just sounds funny. I wish they had another name for it.
Yeah, we were joking. I said, we're not talking about mere mulletism, like Billy Ray Cyrus and his mullet, but Molinism. It does sound funny, but what's interesting, it's even but it is definitely, I think for people, it's worth looking at.
It's interesting that it was this Spanish reformer. Was he a contemporary of Calvin?
Yes,
but they never got to have a conversation.
Calvin had his access to his materials,
really,
and and so some of the claim too is
Beza burned it when he.
Yeah, it would.
The next generation Calvinists, they were like, burn that stuff right now.
Well, it's just fascinating. Even like Tim will talk about, like even the Arminians, like they did not accurately represent Jacob Arminius' viewpoints. So what we get is his followers' understanding of this, and then it's the same thing with the Synod of Dort, where you get the tulip that's put together that the Calvinists hold to. That's not exactly what Calvin taught. They're just trying to, as disciples, say this is what he taught.
Yeah, this is really a nerd conversation right now. We better move on.
It's fun,
like there's three people out there going, okay, I know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Everybody else is going, what?
Well, you just look at the hit count on Molinism. It's not doing the best.
But it's going to start trending after this.
How many people are really interested in sitting through this?
What's the front of the book look like? Is it like a really cool mullet, or?
It's Billy Ray Cyrus reading the book.
Achy, breaky heart.
Hey, you know what, though? I got to say, Tim Stratton, who wrote this book, he has promoted it. It's the best promotion I've ever seen. Like, he keeps doing things like he'll have Yoda, like, he'll Photoshop Yoda, and he says, "Oh, look who I found reading my book," or he'll have like a political candidate, or Nancy Pelosi's reading it, and I love it because it makes it so much fun. Like each day you're wondering who's reading Tim's book.
I think he stole that from Sally Lloyd Jones. She did that.
Is that what she did?
Oh gosh, yeah, she did it amazing. She had all these people. You're like, how did she even Photoshop that? I mean, it was amazing.
It makes it fun though.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, if Yoda's reading the book, I might want to read it. If Nancy's reading it, maybe not.
Yeah, I know exactly, right? So you'll take Yoda's New Age Eastern mysticism, Buddhist inclination teaching over
Nancy Pelosi. All right, so Mere Molinism is the name of that book that Bobby was talking about. You can find out more about it at freethinkingministries.com. And to watch the interview between Bobby and Tim Stratton, go to Bobby's YouTube channel, 1 Minute Apologist, and just do a search for Molinism or Tim Stratton. Again, 1 Minute Apologist on YouTube.
And actually the book is called Human Freedom, Divine Knowledge, and Mere Molinism.
So forget what I just said.
Yeah. No, well, you have
this
part
is just
of it.
an article.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Human Freedom, Divine Knowledge, and Mere Molinism. A biblical, historical, theological, and philosophical analysis.
Did you write that down?
And so, but just really quickly, and then we'll move on. With William Lane Craig, so it's... Most people that know anything about William Lane Craig know that he's a Molinist, but it's not like most people would even necessarily know what that means. So when he says that Tim is sort of pushing his work forward, is he taking from Craig?
Yes. Tim is basically using what Craig has established, and he did his PhD in systematic theology and did it in this arena. So he obviously has some new contributions in his thought. But basically, the meat of it, he is popularizing it. And that's where Craig writes a wonderful endorsement on the back of the book. It's how thankful he is that somebody's taken his work. Right. And so that's where I think you and Cheryl would really enjoy this over a cup of coffee and a donut.
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
Not a donut, though. A gluten-free
cheesecake.
Oat cake.
Oat cake.
Oat cake.
Okay. 888-564-6173 is our phone number. We're here till 5 p.m. Pacific time today. Don't forget that, so give us a call. We would love to hear from you. Let's go to Lake Elsinore. Here's Gary. Welcome to Pastor's Perspective, Gary.
Hello. How are you?
Doing well. How can we help you?
Let me just let my wife know I'm on the air. Carol, I'm on. Turn on your phone. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah.
Hey, everybody! Gary's on the radio.
I had a question about 1 Timothy 2:15, where it talks about a childbearing woman. I wonder if you could expound on that a little bit.
Women will be saved through childbearing if they continue in faith, love, and holiness with propriety. That's from the NIV. Pastor Brian?
Yeah, that's a notoriously difficult passage. Some have interpreted that, and I actually think this is probably better, to child rearing rather than childbearing. And the point that Paul seems to be making, and here's where it gets complicated for us, is because it says she shall be saved. And we tend to, whenever we see the word saved, we just tend to think of saved in one way. We think of saved from your sins, by Jesus. But the word doesn't always mean that. You just have to look at the context. So this is not a passage that's talking about how somebody gets saved. It's probably better to translate the word they're delivered. And what's she going to be delivered from? She's going to be delivered from this desire to put herself in a position that God is not opening up for her. So if you look at the whole context there, it appears that women in the church, and probably sounds like wives, were really trying to take control of the church. And so Paul is telling them, that's not your place. Stick with the place that God has put you. And if you do that, you'll be delivered from this inordinate desire to rule.
Oh, okay. I'm glad you clarified some of that.
Yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah, I've been a Christian for 40 years, and I'm scratching my head a little bit on that.
Yeah, well, yeah, and you can read commentary after commentary, and you get a bunch of different ideas about what it's actually saying. So that's my take on it.
All right, and a similar question here from Melissa in Orange County. Welcome to the program, Melissa.
Hi.
Hello. Thanks for calling 888-564-6173. How can we help you?
Hi. I had a question in regards to the role of women in church. Specifically, do you guys or does Calvary Chapel affirm female pastors or women teaching on Sundays, etc.?
Okay. Now, is there a reason you're asking? Are you aspiring to be a pastor or?
No, but I do know that there's some, popular female pastors like the Beth Moores and the Christine Caines of the world, and I never looked into whether or not being a female pastor is biblical. I just kind of accepted it. Now I'm just kind of curious and looking into it.
Yeah, good. Well, those are great names you just brought up, and the reason I'm saying that is because neither of them are actually pastors. Beth and Christine are both, they're speakers, they're Bible teachers, they're preachers, but they're not pastors of churches. And so Calvary Chapel, there's a little bit of diversity of opinion within Calvary Chapel. There are some Calvary Chapel pastors that believe that a woman cannot teach a mixed group, and especially could not do that on a Sunday morning. So you couldn't have a a woman, in the pulpit teaching the Bible on a Sunday morning, and in some cases you could never do that. And then there are others that would say, well, you could have a woman speak, but she should probably just share more of a testimony and probably do it like at a midweek Bible study versus a Sunday morning. And then there are other Calvary chapels, and I would be an example of this, where I believe that women can teach. They can teach to a mixed group, and that they can do that any day of the week, even a Sunday morning. But I do not believe that a woman is to hold the position that we would call a senior pastor or the primary spiritual leader of the church. So I think Paul's instruction in 1 Timothy 2, if he's forbidding anything, that's what he's forbidding. He's forbidding a woman to lead the church, but that doesn't mean that she can't be involved in these other kinds of things. So what do you think?
Yeah, that makes sense. I know that a lot of people always go back to that one verse in Timothy where it talks about how women cannot teach, and I never really understood the cultural context, so I wanted some more explanation.
Yeah. Did you hear me answer the question before you came on?
Yes.
Okay, that's the context that I understand it in. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Got it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for calling us today on the Pastor's Perspective program. And remember that today's program will soon be archived on YouTube or Spotify and Facebook. If there's any part you want to hear again or maybe share with somebody, just check it out a little bit later today. And do it that way. We're here till 5 p.m. today, by the way.
What do you think about that, Bobby? I've never heard you weigh in on that.
My stance on a female being, I would hold to the same position. I don't have a problem with a female teaching under the authority of a male senior or lead pastor. I always like to say, there was a time if you said something like, under the authority of a male, you didn't have to qualify that. Mm-hmm. Today, you almost sound chauvinistic saying it, and I certainly don't even mean to imply that. I recognize the kind of culture that we live in. I'm just looking at the scriptures, and I'm going, hey, well, the Bible seems to have this type of order that is in place. And honestly, it's so there's this order in the home, but then there's order in the church, there's order in organization. So it's just, yes, there is this submission and headship thing. When I was in North Carolina and I was a lead pastor, everybody was under my leadership, and that was fine. But now that I'm here, Pastor Brian, you're my head, and I'm in submission, and that doesn't bother me.
I bless you, my son.
Yeah, you bless me, your son. That's right. But all that to say is, as I receive that great blessing, and as I go, you're the head of the Calvary Chapel Church here, and the K-Wave. Well, that's fine. That's what the Bible teaches. I think it's healthy to be able to be in a position of authority, and then also, if you're not, to be able to be in a position of submission. So I only bring that out to say, hey, I know what it's like to be in a place of submission, and when you have a great leader, it makes it a lot easier. Where it gets really challenging is when you got a leader that you don't trust. And that's really where it's tough. So when you're in a church where you don't trust the leader, or when you're in a marriage where you don't trust your husband, I don't want to, that's where I think it gets really hard. But boy, I think that there's a lot of women out there who go, man, my husband just makes it so easy. He's so loving. He's such a great servant. It's easy to respond to his leadership. And I think that there's a lot of people that would feel that about their pastors.
Yeah, Cheryl says that about me all the time. Every morning she says, honey, it's just such a joy to submit to you.
And she calls you Lord, right? Like Sarah called Abraham.
Says, let me go make you breakfast. No, you just stay in bed.
Yes. Now, all that to say, it brings up something that a lot of people think Christianity is, like the term you use, Bobby, chauvinistic or sexist, and that it puts women in lower positions, that it doesn't want them to be the head of the church. What do you tell them?
Well, this is like, these are ideas that are genuinely born out of ignorance of reality, ignorance of history. Anybody who wants to take a real serious look at women's liberation, freedom, and women's oppression, you just, study the history of the Roman world, the Greek world, the Middle Eastern world. It doesn't matter what part of the world you want to look at. Women have been oppressed, and the gospel is the one thing that has gone further than anything else to set women free and give them, a place of dignity and that's reality. Even secular historians will concede to that. That before Jesus and the gospel came along, ladies had it really, really tough. Mm-hmm. And, built into the gospel stories, you find women are interlaced all the way through this in ways where they are with Jesus, they're serving, they're alongside the others. There's no, sexism, there's no harassment, there's nothing like that. There's absolute respect and dignity, and you find that through the rest of the New Testament. And you find it in the church, but then, of course, the church goes off the rails at times, and then you can find plenty of examples in the history of the church where the church just took the cultural cue and treated women the way the culture was treating them.
Yep.
There has to be order. I mean, that's the thing. But hopefully it's ordered with character. And that's what makes things so much easier with all this. And by the way, those principles are supposed to be in place too for the leaders, for the husbands, that they are to have character. Because when the character's lacking, you can have order, but it can be forced order. And that doesn't create a good culture. That doesn't create a good climate. And so I think it's really important that we recognize that there has to be order in everything that we do as far as organizational leadership in the home. So it's like a dance, In a dance, what happens? There has to be an initiator. You take the first step and you respond. But guess what? You're dancing. You're moving together, and that's what we ultimately look for. This has nothing to do with men being more important than women. Men are more responsible before God, and they will be held more accountable. And as I've said several times on this program already, I mean, for any woman out there that says, well, I just don't like the word submission. I'd rather my husband be the one that's called to submit. Well, he is called to submit. He's called to lay down his life for his bride in death. So I like to put it like this: submit or die. I mean, the husband is called to die. The husband is called to lay down his life for his wife, for his kids. That is no small order. So I think sometimes the narrative has been pitched in the household. Oh man, women got it tough because they got to submit, and men get to be the head. No, men got to die.
Mm-hmm. This portion of the program brought to you by Square Dancing with Bobby Conway, offering lessons on Saturday afternoons. No, I'm joking. Hey, we're going to take a break, but we will be back in about 5 minutes or so. If you're on hold right now, stay on hold. We will get to your call. So like Michael and Kirk and Riley and Roy and Ashley, don't hang up. We will get to you in just a little bit. In about 5 minutes, we're going to take another hour of the program, and then we will record this hour, the audio, play it back on Monday. So give us a call during the next hour as well. We're going to keep the phone lines open. 888-564-6173. For Brian Broderson and Bobby Conway, I'm Brian Perez. Have a good night. God bless.
Thanks for listening to Pastor's Perspective. We trust you've been blessed and had your question answered. Join us Monday through Friday and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Pastor's Perspective. The preceding was sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, California.